Let's get the thoughts now of the government this morning on all today's news. The Economic Secretary to the Treasury, Andrew Griffith, joins me now down the line. A very good morning to you, Andrew Griffith. Thanks so much for talking to us.
Good morning, Anna.
I want to start off by asking you about the Institute for Fiscal Studies report out today, which says that the government is on course to have overseen the largest set of tax rises since the Second World War. How does that feel as a Conservative?
Well, as a Conservative, Anna, I think that the economy runs best when it has stability, which is our focus right now, bringing down inflation, which is a tax rise by another name. But also, I believe that it is best that people keep more of their own money. It's one reason why we've taken 3 million people since 2010 out of tax by increasing the personal tax allowance. So this is still a government that believes in taking people out of tax and reducing the tax burden. Now, the context is incredibly important. We've had this global pandemic. No one foresaw that coming. And we had to spend a very significant amount of money. It's about £8,000 to £12,000 for a household of two people. So really, really significant. I don't think everyone fully realizes that because that was so dispersed across the economy. And that's what's driven up the tax burden. But Conservatives believe in low tax. We have taken people, even in this government, out of tax entirely, allowed people to keep more of what they earn. Right now, because of the constraints that the economy is under, our priority is inflation. I'm pleased that the plan for reducing inflation is on track, but there's no margin to change that at the moment. We've got to stick with it and deliver that.
Well, it's interesting, you say it's about COVID, but the IFS says it's not just about COVID, it's also about other factors like an ageing population and pressures on the health service. It's not just because of the pandemic.
No, it's quite true that across society there are many pressures on the public purse. That's why tough choices are required, why it would be a disaster to have a Labour government coming in making unfunded spending promises, which would undo all of our good work in the fight against inflation, which will ultimately reduce interest rates, which is relieving that burden on people. So I fully understand that. It is philosophically our desire to let people keep more of what they earn, to reduce tax burden, to make sure that every pound that the government spends is as productive as possible. We owe it to people to do that, and that's the way that you can reconcile really high quality public services with not increasing the tax burden.
Well, we'll have Labour on later. I'm pretty sure they would say they won't be making unfunded tax promises. But the ageing population and its pressures are issues that just won't go away, will they? So taxes are going to have to stay high in the next Parliament, aren't they?
Look, I don't accept that. I mean, no one's going to make a forecast now, but there's also great changes in productivity. So it's not true that you can't do more with the same amount of money. When we look at new diagnostic technologies, the power of AI, genomics, the ability to individually profile people's gene, preventative medicine. So there are things that go in both directions. Yes, we're an aging economy, but there's also great productivity benefits that we can anticipate over time.
So are you saying that we can expect some tax cuts before the next general election?
No, that's absolutely not what I'm saying. And I think any responsible Treasury minister wouldn't come on your wonderful programme this morning, Anna, and make specific commitments. That's not the world we're in. We're very, very clear about our priority right now. And it's good to be focused and be clear about what matters. Right now, that priority is bearing down on inflation, cost of living, allowing people to their household budgets to go further because they're not seeing that steady increase in prices. That plan is working. We've got to stick with that. We've got to push that across the finishing line. The objective was to halve inflation by the end of this year, and the latest forecasts from the Bank of England confirm we are on track to do that. But there can be no respite. We need to be focused on that first. Beyond that, and your viewers will have a big choice to make in 2024 about the nature of the government that they want to see. Beyond that, as a Conservative, and my fellow Conservatives believe in people keeping more of what they earn and having a productive economy by over time reducing the tax burden.
One way that money could be saved for pre-election tax giveaways or tax cuts would be scaling back HS2, wouldn't it? You've got a lot of Tories heading to Manchester for the conference this weekend. Can you clear up this issue of whether or not the Manchester leg will go ahead or not?
No, I can't, but many of us won't be going to conference by train. And the reason why is because the trade unions have, in a very political way, decided to strike. They are undermining the future of the railways by introducing, less and less reliable services, putting people off, forcing them to take alternative modes of transport. That's not good for the future of rail in this country. It's not good for a productive economy.
Sorry to interrupt. Has that got anything to do with spiralling costs of HS2, though? What are the costs of HS2? You work in the Treasury. How much has it cost so far, and how much would it cost to extend to Manchester?
Well, we started this interview talking about the burden of the tax on people, the fact that tax is a very high level. And in that context, of course, it's right. And we'd have done this at Sky when I was in business. Any major project, particularly if there are overruns, to look at the phasing of that project. That's just good government ministers being diligent, trying to spend taxpayers' money wisely. No announcement on that this morning, Anna, but you'd expect that. And if that wasn't the case, you'd probably quite rightly criticise for not spending taxpayers' money wisely.
OK, and maybe another time we'll get the figures on how much it's costing at the moment. I do want to ask you about some of the reports out in the papers today suggesting that the Prime Minister is going to introduce a package of measures for motorists, which could see councils blocked from introducing 20-mile-an-hour speed restrictions. Can you confirm that's a government plan?
I can't. I haven't seen those plans. I know that the Prime Minister and my colleagues and the Transport Secretary are very focused on making sure that motorists get a fair deal.
Are they a good idea then?
Well, a blanket measure is rarely a good idea. So if that's something like we've seen in Wales, where vast parts of that province have had arbitrary speed limits imposed on them, then I don't think that is the right approach, just as it's not the right approach to blanket the whole of Greater London with ULEZ and a higher cost for motorists. I represent a rural area, and there are some villages where kids are crossing the road, or perhaps the pavements aren't as present as they would be in an urban area. And it makes perfect sense in very selected areas to let people decide. But I certainly think that if the Prime Minister's speculated saying that it's wrong to impose blanket bans or blanket charges on motorists, then I think your viewers will understand and think that's probably the right thing to do.
And finally, I just want to ask you about a report that we're running today about the nearly 2,900 prisoners with imprisonment for public protection sentences, IPPs, who are still in prison at the moment, even though those sentences were outlawed in 2012. Is it time for them to be resentenced?
Well, I saw that investigation that Sky News has done. We did abolish those what are called IPP sentences back in 2012. And since then, the number of prisoners still in jail on those has been reduced by 3/4. We've got an action plan to help them, to help them meet the conditions for parole. But we make no apology for putting public protection first. Ultimately, these are the right questions for the parole board. And I think it would be wrong to, again, just come up with some blanket approach. The parole board is the right body to make these decisions. But I understand the issue of IPPP. The Justice Secretary himself has called that a stain on the conscience of the justice system. So it's wrong. It's stopped now. We stopped it back in 2012. But we've got to look at the parole board doing the job that it's there to do in terms of the release of the quarter of those prisoners, 3/4 having already been released.